There is an aircraft in the sky right now that has exactly one purpose. It does not drop bombs. It does not carry soldiers into combat zones. It does not haul fuel or food or battlefield supplies. It does not gather signals intelligence or photograph enemy positions from altitude. This aircraft carries a single capability, and that capability is the authority to end human civilization as we know it. The United States Navy calls this aircraft the E-6B Mercury. The flight tracking analysts who monitor global military aviation movements around the clock, the independent researchers who watch transponder data and cross-reference it with military movement patterns, the defense journalists who have spent careers decoding what the Pentagon refuses to say out loud, they call it something else entirely. They call it the Doomsday Plane. And right now, in the middle of a war that began 10 days ago with no exit strategy, no defined victory condition, and no plan for what happens when the bombs stop falling, the Doomsday Plane is in the air. Since February 28th, the exact day this war started, multiple E-6B Mercury aircraft have been tracked departing their home bases and moving. On March 2nd, flight analysts documented 2 separate E-6Bs airborne simultaneously, one departing from the Gulf Coast heading northeast toward Naval Air Station Patuxent River in Maryland, another lifting off from Offutt Air Force Base in Nebraska and tracking east. In the days that followed, additional E-6B launches were documented by military aviation monitoring networks, with flight paths tracking toward the Atlantic, toward Europe, toward the Persian Gulf. The Pentagon was asked directly about the flights. Its official response cited operational security. It declined to comment further. That silence, in a conflict already defined by what is not being said publicly, is its own form of communication. To understand why this matters, you have to understand what the E-6B Mercury actually does. Every nuclear weapon in America's arsenal, the intercontinental ballistic missiles sitting in hardened underground silos across the American interior, the thermonuclear warheads loaded onto submarines currently running silent beneath the world's oceans, the gravity bombs loaded onto long-range strategic bombers on ready alert. Every single one of those weapons requires a direct authenticated command from the President of the United States or the Secretary of Defense before it can be launched. That command does not travel through a single wire. It travels through a chain of communication infrastructure. Ground-based command centers, military satellites in orbit, secure hardened radio networks, underground bunker facilities built specifically to survive attack. That entire chain has one critical vulnerability. It is physical. It exists in specific places. It can be found, targeted, and destroyed. If an adversary lands a sufficiently precise first strike, conventional or nuclear, against enough nodes in that chain, the chain breaks. The command cannot be sent. America loses the ability to give the nuclear launch order even if the president is alive and giving it. The E-6B Mercury was built to make that scenario impossible. The aircraft is a flying nuclear command center constructed on a modified Boeing 707 airframe. It carries a crew of 22 personnel. It is capable of flying 7,000 miles on a single fuel load. With aerial refueling, it can remain airborne for nearly 3 continuous days. It is hardened against electromagnetic pulse attacks, the kind of energy burst that a nuclear detonation at high altitude produces, and that would fry conventional electronics across hundreds of miles. It carries a 5-meter-long trailing wire antenna that can transmit very low-frequency signals, signals capable of penetrating hundreds of meters of ocean water, directly to nuclear submarines running deep and silent, submarines that cannot be reached by any conventional radio frequency. Its mission designation is TACAMO, take charge and move out. The meaning of that designation is as direct as military language gets. Even if every single ground-based command center in the United States is vaporized in a first strike, this aircraft keeps flying, keeps transmitting, keeps the nuclear chain of command unbroken and operational. From this plane, the order to launch intercontinental ballistic missiles, weapons that travel 10,000 kilometers and carry warheads 1,000 times more powerful than the bomb that leveled Hiroshima, can be transmitted to American submarines and missile silos in every corner of the planet. The Doomsday Plane exists because nuclear deterrence only functions if the enemy believes you can always fire back. This aircraft is the guarantee of that belief. Military analysts are precise in noting that E-6B activity is not inherently alarming in isolation. The aircraft must fly regularly to maintain crew readiness and operational capability. Training missions happen, readiness exercises happen. An uptick in E-6B flight activity does not automatically mean a nuclear strike is being actively planned. The Pentagon has been deliberate in avoiding any public language that suggests nuclear escalation, but here is the context that makes dismissing these flights completely impossible. They began on the exact day this war started. They have continued with documented regularity across 10 consecutive days of active conflict. And they are occurring at the precise convergence of the following conditions. Iranian ballistic missiles are successfully striking American military bases across the Gulf region with growing accuracy. Russia has publicly confirmed it is sharing real-time intelligence on American troop positions with Iran. China is reportedly supplying drone components to Iranian forces, with the U.S. Navy present in the region, and unable to interdict the deliveries without triggering a second simultaneous confrontation with the world's second-largest military. And American war planners, by their own private admission to journalists, entered this conflict without a clear endgame, without a defined victory condition, and without a plan for the aftermath. The Doomsday Plane does not deploy toward active war theaters because things are going according to plan. Here is a fact that places this in its proper historical weight. The United States has fought continuous wars across the Middle East for 25 years. Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Yemen, proxy operations across a dozen additional theaters. Through all of those conflicts, wars that consumed trillions of dollars and thousands of American lives, wars that reshaped entire nations and produced refugee crises measured in millions of people, the E-6B Mercury stayed on the ground or flew training circuits over the continental United States. It never moved toward an active combat theater. It never needed to. It is moving now. The Daily Mail's flight tracking report stated it directly. Fears of potential nuclear conflict are intensifying following the ongoing war in Iran. Not fears of a costly war, not fears of strategic setback, fears of nuclear conflict, a category of concern that belongs to a different chapter of history entirely, a chapter that has not been opened since 1945, when America used 2 nuclear weapons against Japan and killed over 200,000 people in 2 cities across 2 days. The E-6B Mercury was built because the world agreed after those 2 cities burned that nuclear weapons could never again be used without an absolutely unbroken, absolutely certain chain of command from the president's voice to the launch button. The plane that protects that chain is now flying toward the region where America's war is being fought. The weight of what that represents does not require exaggeration. It requires only honest acknowledgement. Now look at the conventional military map, because this is the context in which that aircraft is flying. The United States entered this war with the largest military concentration in the Middle East since the 2003 invasion of Iraq. 2 aircraft carrier strike groups deployed, B-2 stealth bombers positioned, F-35 fighter wings forward staged, the most advanced integrated air defense systems in American inventory, military bases across more than a dozen regional countries. The combined targeting intelligence of the CIA and Mossad, built over decades of operations inside Iran's borders. 10 days in, here is what the military picture actually looks like. Qatar, which hosts Al Udeid Air Base, the largest American air installation in the entire Middle East, housing thousands of U.S. military personnel and functioning as the primary command and logistics hub for American air operations across the entire region, has formally and publicly declared that its territory, its airspace, its land, and its territorial waters will not be used for any offensive military action against Iran. The UAE made the identical declaration. Both governments announced these positions clearly, publicly, and officially. They are now on record. Understand what this means operationally. America is prosecuting a war from military bases located in countries that have told America not to use those bases to prosecute the war. The soldiers are stationed there, the aircraft are hangared there, the command infrastructure is embedded there. But the governments that own the ground beneath those installations have drawn a line, and the line is this: defend our territory if attacked, yes. Launch offensive strikes against Iran from our soil, no. U.S. Senator Lindsey Graham, among the most loudly vocal congressional supporters of this war, called publicly on Gulf Arab states to join the offensive coalition and strike Iranian targets directly. Qatar declined, Kuwait declined, Saudi Arabia declined, the UAE declined. Every one of them declined publicly, not quietly through diplomatic back channels, but in formal official statements. The Gulf Cooperation Council, the 6-nation alliance that America has spent decades cultivating, arming, training, and financing as its primary security architecture across the Arabian Peninsula, is collectively and unanimously refusing to become a co-combatant. The message from every Gulf capital has been the same: this is not our war. The coalition that was supposed to materialize does not exist. China is accelerating its involvement with deliberate strategic patience. Multiple American media organizations, citing U.S. intelligence officials directly, reported this week that China has been supplying drone components to Iranian forces. The U.S. Navy is deployed in the Persian Gulf, the Red Sea, the Arabian Sea, and the Mediterranean simultaneously. American warships are physically present on the supply routes China is using, and according to the same intelligence reporting, the Navy is watching those routes and cannot stop the deliveries, not has chosen not to. The legal, diplomatic, and strategic cost of directly interdicting Chinese naval or commercial vessels carrying components to Iran would open a second simultaneous confrontation with the world's second-largest economy and second-largest military, a confrontation that no current American war plan can manage alongside the existing conflict. Russia confirmed weeks ago that it is providing Iran with live intelligence on the locations and movements of American troops across the region. That intelligence is being used to target U.S. personnel with precision. 7 American soldiers are confirmed dead. Dozens more are wounded. Iran has struck American military installations in Bahrain, Kuwait, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia repeatedly, consistently, and with increasing targeting accuracy over 10 consecutive days. And the Houthi movement in Yemen, which had suspended its Red Sea campaign since October 2024, publicly announced this week through its senior leadership that its forces remain fully mobilized, fully equipped, and waiting for the signal to re-engage. If the Houthis re-enter the conflict and resume targeting commercial shipping in the Red Sea and the Bab al-Mandeb Strait, the last viable alternative shipping route, the path around the Arabian Peninsula, through the Red Sea, and up through the Suez Canal, disappears. At that point, the Strait of Hormuz is closed from the north by Iran, and the Red Sea is closed from the south by the Houthis, simultaneously. Every barrel of Gulf oil, every cubic meter of liquefied natural gas, every container ship connecting the world's largest manufacturing economy to its largest consumer markets. All of it has nowhere to go. This is not a theoretical scenario. This is the described and demonstrated capability of 2 groups that are currently mobilized, currently equipped, currently receiving Russian intelligence, and currently receiving Chinese components. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps has publicly stated it is prepared to sustain this war for 6 months. Its senior military commanders have gone further in direct interviews, stating that the IRGC's strategic reserves, missile production capacity, and operational infrastructure allow for an extended engagement well beyond what American planners projected when they assessed pre-war timelines. The White House initially described this as a short operation, then revised its public timeline to 3 to 6 months. Iran's commanders are saying they are prepared to fight past that. America is spending $891 million per day on this conflict. 100 days at that rate is $89 billion, and 6 months is more than $160 billion, almost entirely unbudgeted, being borrowed and spent while domestic gas prices climb, stock markets close lower each week, and the political cost of this war compounds daily for an administration that campaigned on economic competence and is now presiding over the most expensive unplanned military operation in a generation. That is the corner. Diplomatically isolated, regionally unsupported, economically bleeding, conventionally stalemated, and in that corner the Doomsday Plane is flying. The honest answer from every credible defense analyst who has spoken publicly is that a nuclear strike on Iran is almost certainly not imminent. Iran does not have the strategic nuclear capability that historically triggers America's nuclear command architecture. The E-6B was designed for peer nuclear adversaries, Russia or China, launching attacks that destroy American ground command infrastructure. Iran has no ICBMs that reach the continental United States. Iran has no thermonuclear warheads, but the plane is flying anyway, and there are 2 serious analytical explanations for why, and neither one is comfortable. The first is deterrent signaling, deploying visible components of the nuclear command structure to send a message to every party watching that escalation will be met with escalation, that the nuclear option has not been placed off the table even if it remains far back in the queue. The second explanation is the one that 4 government officials described to The Intercept when they said the Trump administration entered this war with no endgame, no real rationale, and no plan for the aftermath, confirmed by the Washington Post's characterization of the strategy as regime change by jazz improvisation. When a leadership that is improvising, surprised by the scale of retaliation, diplomatically isolated, economically squeezed, regionally abandoned, and running out of conventional leverage, deploys its nuclear command aircraft, even for deterrence purposes, the signal that it sends to the world is not one of strength. It is one of desperation. And the world is reading it exactly that way. China is not stopping its shipments. Russia is not stopping its intelligence sharing. The Gulf states are not joining the offensive. Britain is not sending strike assets. France is limiting its role. Every ally America expected to rally is instead calculating its own interests and stepping carefully back. The aircraft has a crew of 22. It carries no weapons. It carries no bombs. It carries only the authority to end everything. And it is in the air right now over a war that is 10 days old with no exit strategy, no defined victory condition, and no plan for what happens next. The Doomsday Plane does not fly for wars that are going well.